So just to start out, when I say coach, so you can go into book after book after book or seminar after seminar and get multiple different versions of, well, coaching means this and definition of coaching. But today I'm going to use coaching as a verb, not as a noun. It will be a noun too because I kind of move it all over the place. But when we're talking about it today, it doesn't have to be in your title. Let's talk about it as a verb, to coach. And so that we're really talking about, training intensively or, using instruction and demonstration and coaching in that way. And then I thought this was funny as I was looking at things, just for a little chuckle. I thought some of these related words were, to direct, okay, that sounds good. Engineer, steer, sway, accompany, attend, chaperone, escort, oversee, superintend, supervise, drill, train, brief, enlighten, inform, instruct, school, teach, tutor, indoctrinate, cultivate, foster, nurture. I also thought we could have, hand-holding, tear drying, blood, sweat, and tears, all of that in there because I felt like, oh, yeah, that's all coaching. That's what we do. So it just gave me a little chuckle to see all those words. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about today is this very simple little model that really I can explain in about 2 minutes. But then if you sit back and really think about it, it starts to really sink in and you scratch your head about it. So kind of like the model for improvement, so easy to understand, and then when you go to actually implement it, it becomes quite complex. And that's what I feel about this little model. So my colleague Neil Baker at IHI and myself developed this model as we were talking one day about, well, how do you know what to do when you get there? So, if for my case, if I'm coaching a practice and, I go in today, I have a meeting with them, we have an agenda for our meeting, I'm all set up exactly how textbook style you're supposed to do this, how do you decide what to do when you get there? I was saying, well, it's kind of a shot from the hip, and, you have to be real nimble and move around on your feet. And after we talked about it for a while, I thought, I don't think I'm doing this very well. I thought, I think this can be done better, and I think it's because I'm not really, while I have an agenda, and I have goals for this practice, and I know what goals I want this practice to do. The practice is the one that chooses its own PDSA cycles, and I'll work with them on what they choose to do and those types of things. But have I really thought about what I'm doing while I'm in this practice today? And that's when we started to come up with these circles up on top, or I'm going to call them bubbles. And so we started to really look at when you're in a practice or coaching anything, so when you're in a team meeting and you're coaching your team, are you really thinking about the skill set that you're using to get that team where they're going today? And so let me just walk us through this a little bit, and then I'll explain how it applied to what I was doing. And so at the far left of your screen, it's basically doing tasks for the team. This used to be real common when we had to use registries or when we had to populate registries to do quality improvement. One of the methodologies was just go in there and, on, several nights and weekends and, I could get this populated for them and I wouldn't have to ask anyone in the practice to do it. So you can sometimes drop back and actually do things for the team. And then, we said, well, there's some facilitating, and so you could facilitate meetings. You could, help facilitate how, they're going to interact with other forms of leadership within the organization, those types of things. Consulting is really when I'm coming into this practice and I have all the answers. That's kind of what a consultant does is, when a question is asked and an answer needs to be given, that's more the consulting. And then training, how to take a good blood pressure, what is the model for improvement, that's training. And then we started to think, coaching. Now, coaching, I as a coach need all of these behaviors. But then we talked about, well, if you're going to coach something new, if I want to coach someone on how to lead a good team meeting, then I could do it I could facilitate the meeting myself and show them how to do that. That would be modeling it, but I'd be facilitating for them. Coaching is more working with them ahead of time, getting them ready for it, letting them do it, sitting in the back of the room, watching, and then afterwards following up and really seeing how did it go, what happened with it. If you're going to coach the model for improvement, you may not even have to be at the meeting. You just want to follow up and make sure, what are your PDSA cycles? Did you make your projections? Did you document those projections so you have them? And, so you can coach them along through it. So we started to think about these different behaviors, and all of a sudden it dawned on me that, wow, I facilitate a lot. I would argue that I facilitate all over the place. And I don't even think I was really realizing it until I realized that I didn't use all of these other behaviors as much as I could have to really get us where we need to go. And then we started to look at these things and said, I think that there's a progression of these so that if a practice or if your team is in a project mentality, so now I'm looking down at the boxes. So you have this big arrow and then the boxes underneath. If your teams are in a project mentality of, well, they told us we had to get an EHR, so we're going to get an EHR, and we're going to put this in. And it's going to be a lot of work, and we're going to do all these things, but then it's done, and we're not going to do anything after that. Then that's very much a project-minded mentality. If we're going to work for 3 months on improving, patient education, then we're going to work for 3 months on it, and at the end of 3 months, we're going to stop doing it. And unfortunately, we still have a lot of project-minded stuff out there. So basically, the project-minded work falls towards, in this model, falls to the left-hand side. And so when you coach in that type of an environment, there is sometimes, a lot of times, you can work and you can just simply, so if we're going to work to improve patient education, maybe we're looking for new pamphlets and posters to hang up, and, do I need to really, coach a team on how to look for pamphlets and posters, or if this is a one-shot deal, I can just go pick them out and bring them into the practice. And so sometimes it's just a matter of doing it and getting it done. But what we found was that if we really wanted a practice to be more transformational, meaning that they really are, that the team or the practice is really owning the process and they want to change, if we want to empower them to get things done on their own and learn how to do it so that they can be transformational, which means always transforming, we really needed to work to the right-hand side of the spectrum. And so it really doesn't help me to go in and do things for this practice. It helps this practice if I go in and use these skill sets in these bubbles to get them where they need to go. So I started to look at this and thought, oh my gosh, I've been defaulting to facilitating for years just simply because that's my comfort zone. I'm very comfortable. If any of you know me, I don't even have to know you or your meeting. I'll come in and facilitate it for you. While, that's an okay skill to have, I wasn't really thinking about these other things and how I could really effectively use them. And once I was able to start to change those around a little bit, it really made, and like I said, you can do this in coaching anything. You can do this in raising your children. Sometimes you facilitate with your children. Sometimes you simply do it for them. Sometimes you give them the answers, but sometimes you really coach them along. And so this is just a matter of leading change and coaching change, and how do you do this? So talk about, with this, and thinking about your role in coaching change and knowing that change has to have a level of discomfort to it. I wanted to talk about Mary Beth O'Neill's rescue versus responsibility model. And what we really want, and this is from her book, and I have at my last slide today, I think I have some of these resources if people want the books. But Mary Beth O'Neill has this great model out there, and it's really just, again, to get us to think about our own actions in coaching and leading change. And this rescue model is something that I think a lot of people in healthcare do. And actually, Mary Beth O'Neill is from the organizational development world. She's from high-level business consulting world. Not maybe healthcare, but only in, big Fortune 500 company type healthcare. She's a business-minded person, and I would argue that the more and more I think about this model, I think those of us who work in healthcare are really prone to rescuing. We have to be really, really careful about this. And so let's walk through this and see if you agree with me. So Mary Beth O'Neill says that attitudes that support rescuing when coaching is that the coach thinks the team cannot do it on their own, meaning that they cannot do it without me. If I wasn't here today, they wouldn't even be meeting, or they wouldn't be moving this along. Other attitudes that support rescuing is that the coach oversees how the team does things in case they may blow it. This is a perfect example. So like if your team is starting to develop their PDSAs, so you've already gone through and decided, how you'll know that change is an improvement, and if you're starting to move on and say, okay, well, what changes will result in an improvement? Your ability to drop back and coach how to pick a PDSA versus telling them which PDSA to pick is a good indication that you might be rescuing. And for me, this is, because we go into practices and we'll coach practice after practice after practice. Some of that is just the practice learning how to use the model for improvement. So I will tell you that foot exam posters don't work. Okay, but I will tell you that as soon as I get a practice with diabetes and they have to improve foot exams, what's the first thing they want to do? They want to put a foot exam poster up in every room. Okay, and then what happens, it's even worse, they'll get a little blip in their foot exam data, and that's because the posters are new and everybody responds to them and then everybody's jazzed about them. But what happens 3 or 4 months later is those posters are now basically a part of the wallpaper and nobody really pays attention to them anymore, and they don't work, or they're not sustainable change anyways. And so the hard thing as a coach is, I know that, but that's part of the learning process. And if I'm going to help this practice, if I'm going to coach this practice on learning how to embed the model for improvement in their program, if I'm going to help them really trust the model for improvement and reflect in their data and those types of things, then I have to be willing to oversee, what they're doing. I have to be willing to coach what they're doing, but I have to be able to let them make their own choices. And sometimes that's really hard to do. And then this last one is this attitude of the coach feels the need to do things for the team because he or she has the expertise. So me going in there and telling them foot exam posters won't work is absolutely me rescuing this practice. And so some of the behaviors that support this, these are just some of those, self-check type behaviors. If you think you're in here coaching this team and you start to take up more airtime than anyone else, then you're not coaching. Now, you might have dropped into that consulting role, and as a coach you're going to consult today, and that's fine, but you have to watch your behaviors. Are you rescuing? Is consulting the best thing for you to do today? As the other behaviors are the coach makes decisions for the practice, client and team. This might be hard for a lot of you all in that I think you'll be coaching or you are coaching change and improvement in the same organization where you work, and you may be a leader. So, you'll just have to decide, are you making this decision because you're a coach who's rescuing this team, or are you making this decision because you're a leader and it's your executive decision to make? I think distinguishing between those is good, and you think you just have to make sure that you're in the right place in the right moment. So, and then the other behavior is that the coach gives more answers than offering clarifying questions. If we're truly there as coaching change, offering those clarifying questions is really important. I find, even if you're consulting, and I think it was Drew who just said that he's often in that consulting mode, but they ask him questions that he doesn't have the answers to. And that's where clarifying questions can really help in that. But if you're quick to jump in there with the answers instead of trying to get more information, you may find that you're rescuing the practice. A picture of what Mary Beth O'Neill is saying in her model is she's saying that basically if you're down here as the coach, if the team is giving you their challenge and you're taking it on down here as the coach, then basically that team has a secondary relationship with their challenge. And I think that that's, all of a sudden when I start to think about that, I'm like, oh, that's right. If I'm home and I can't sleep tonight, and I can't sleep tonight because what is going to happen to this practice if they can't get this together? That's a much different feeling than I can't sleep tonight because I can't think of a way to help this practice handle this challenge. Those are two different, now, equal loss of sleep probably, but, if I'm sitting home thinking of ways to manage that team's challenge, then I'm definitely rescuing. If I'm sitting at home thinking of ways that I can motivate that team to meet their challenge, then I'm not. And so I think it's just, again, a really easy, so really what then Mary Beth O'Neill goes into the responsibility model, which is something I think we all need to aspire to, which basically means the team owns their own challenge. Your organization gave you 6 months to meet patient-centered medical home. I don't think that that's nearly enough time. I'll coach you and help you on what we can, and I think we'll make the changes that we need to make. But this timeline, this pressure, those types of things, those are yours, and I will help you work through them and those types of things. So it's an interesting way to do it. I think I like her use of the primary and secondary relationship as it's dealing with the challenges, because I think, again, often in healthcare, we get into healthcare to help people, right? And we get into healthcare. My background's in social work. I want to help reduce people's burdens. That's really what I like. But I have to look at, am I doing it in an empowering kind of way? And it's no different when you're coaching teams. I want to empower this team to face their challenge. I don't want to take their challenge on. So let's look at the attitudes involved in this responsibility model. So some of these attitudes are that the coach wants to empower the team to develop their own approach rather than simply adopting that of the coach. If I try to approach this in a responsibility model, one of the things that I like to keep in my pocket is if I empower them to develop their own, I learn from them. They actually add to my toolkit then. Where if I just simply go through and tell everyone that a foot exam poster won't work, so don't start there, I'm not learning a thing. All I'm doing is spreading what I got. If they're saying, well, we don't really want to do a foot exam poster, but we might want to do it this way, there might be something I can learn out of that. And I think that's a much different attitude about what we're doing today. The other ones are the coach understands that the team has to live with the results of their decisions. And I think this gets back to, what's keeping you up at night. And if what's keeping you up tonight is, the reaction or the consequence of the decisions that were made in that practice today, then I would argue that the practice isn't owning them. I think the coach is. And so I think you have to look at that the coach has to understand and have the attitude that the team lives with the results of their own decisions. Therefore, if we have to wait 4 months to understand that the foot exam posters don't work, then that's fine. We're going to learn a lot in that process. And I think that, there's nothing wrong with that, and I need to understand that they own that decision. The other thing is the coach must accept that good enough. I think this is my favorite one. So if there's one little piece you take out of this whole thing, it's this. The coach must accept that good enough and highly committed by the team is way better than outstanding by the coach. This is my favorite one. Good enough and highly committed by the team is better than outstanding outstanding by the coach. This one is hard to swallow if you are good at going into practices and coaching. But it's so true. If this practice really, I keep picking on these foot exam posters, but it's just a real easy example to put in there. If this practice is so behind these foot exam posters and they really want to do it, then them trying that and being committed to it is so much better than me saying, oh, go in, do this, do this, do this, and this will improve. And so, you know, I mean, I think it's, to me, I love this mantra. My colleague Neil Baker, who did the first model with me, has this saying that he says that the informed pessimist will always outdo the uninformed optimist. And I think these little sayings are so important because this saying of good enough and highly committed by the team is better than outstanding by the coach is so true. And I think that it really, you know, these are the things that we have to keep inside and build in our own attitudes to make this really work. So, and the last one is that the focus must be on the strengths of the team and not the strengths of the coach. So I'm good at facilitating meetings. And so if we want to meet about this, I can really facilitate the heck out of that meeting. But if those meetings don't work for this team, then I need to put that skill set aside and work on what helps them. And I think that that's a key piece in all of this, is that it has to be me coaching them on how to facilitate meetings when meetings aren't really going to get things done for this practice. This isn't the kind of practice who wants to run meetings and those types of things. It really doesn't line up that way. I have to be flexible enough as a coach to really focus on what are the strengths of this team, what do they bring to this, and then, you know, how can we build off of that? And again, I drop back to what can I learn from them and that's what makes it much more of their responsibility. They own the process. So some of the behaviors then, when you're coaching, that really develop this responsibility piece is that the coach stimulates the team's thinking so they know their own position on an issue or problem. And this is sometimes hard, and if you're in a dual role like a lot of you are, this might be even harder. That the team has its own position that is or is not mine. I mean, it has nothing to do, it has no relation to my position on a key problem or issue. And I think the next one is the coach aggressively seeks opportunities to invite the team to be decisive and to articulate and or document their decisions. I think, to me, this is so important because this articulating and documentation of their decisions has to be key going through, because otherwise you'll find, I find anyways, that as the coach, I remember decisions that were made, but they either don't remember them or have moved on, and nobody has anything to refer back to. And so I think it's important to really get, this is where meeting minutes and those types of things come in really handy, because I think otherwise they're relying on you as a coach as basically their memory bank, and we can't have that. The coach encourages the team to stay connected to the challenge and to own their own challenge and the success in overcoming it. I think that's the other thing, that if you rescue this practice, if you're really sheltering them from facing their own challenges, and if you're taking too much on, then you have to keep in mind that you're taking the success away from them too. That, you know, if I'm jumping in and saying, oh, no, don't do that, work on this over here, this always gets better improvement and things like that, then sure, maybe they can have some success in my idea worked. But that's not nearly as empowering as knowing that their own idea worked. And so I think, you know, keep that in mind, that if you are rescuing or doing things for them, then you're taking away the success too. So